Everybody can see the map, I'm hoping. So if not, I guess you can post a little thing in there and Kathleen will help you out. So we were in New Zealand from December 2018 to the end of February 2019. We actually spent 10 days in Brisbane at my brother's place before we went over to New Zealand. We went in and out of Auckland, and we did rent a car. We went with a local New Zealand company. I prefer, rather than the big Hertz budget, all those big companies, I prefer to support the locals. So we went with a local New Zealand company. If you are renting a car in New Zealand, you have to pay attention to what their rules are around going on the ferry between North and South Island, if that's something that you're looking for. We stayed probably 2/3 of our time over there with travel club members. Mostly we would stay for 3 nights. If we were traveling faster and only wanting to stay 1 night in a place, we generally wouldn't stay with the travel club members, simply because we have so much fun with travel club members and you want to visit with them and get to know them. We just didn't feel like 1 night was good. So, but mostly we'd stay 3 nights, sometimes 4 nights. People were very generous, very wonderful. We had a great time. So the map there, Leo's going to tell you about our trip.
Yeah, I'll just briefly talk a tiny bit about the map, but it kind of relates obviously to the trip. But before we start, I'd like to comment that we use a little app called Maps Me. It's not that I dislike Google, but I use this one because you can bookmark something. So if you're going to find a museum, or you're going to find, let's say, the hotel next to the airport, you have this ability on this little app called Maps Me. You have the ability to put a bookmark there, and you can color coordinate it. And that allows you to, like, let's say you're flying into Auckland, but you're coming out of Auckland later. Well, then you can find your hotel or whatever, because everything is bookmarked. So that's the first thing I wanted to replace with respect to the map. The other thing is, we landed in Auckland, but we went and got the car rental, but we stayed put because of rush hour traffic. We stayed because there's enough bridges across Auckland. We kind of stayed where we are, and don't forget, we're driving on the opposite side of the road. So the car rental was kind of like an industrial park. We just kind of drove around the industrial park, made sure we're totally comfortable with the vehicle, and chewed up about 3 or 4 hours so that rush hour traffic was gone. And then we were able to basically drive right to the location. So our first hosts had us there for 3 nights, and they were wonderful. The lady had been in the program before, but she just got remarried, and the guy had never experienced any of this ATC Evergreen stuff, so it was all new to him. But they were wonderful hosts. In any case, so we made it through Auckland. We basically stayed up in Fangeray. The WH is the letter F, or sounds of F. Then we went up to where it says Pahia and the Bay of Islands, which is just magical. And then from there, you see Keri and Cotta. And then from there, we did a day trip all the way up to Cape Rienga. We had a local guy take us up there, rather than paying for a bus tour or something. This guy did it for us. Instead of like $90 per person, he did it for $60, and we had so much more fun doing it that way. And then obviously coming back, we made it back to Cotta, and then we took the north side of that road that took us back to Pahia and the Bay of Islands. And then from there, we worked our way south back to Auckland's. And then right at the bottom, just south of Auckland's there, my wife's going to show you a little bit later on, but that it says Waiuku. That's where we will, come back to. So I'll hand it back to Anita.
Okay, so we'll go into the first. This is a good thing that they have in a lot of the roads down there. I don't know how many of you have gone to countries where you've had to drive on the left-hand side of the road, but lots of signs to keep you on the right part of the road and to keep you looking in the right direction before you cross onto the road. So this is just west of Auckland. We went out to something called Pahia Beach, and there's a black iron sand, which we've seen, we'll see it in a few other places as well. This is a very famous surfing beach in New Zealand, one of the most famous surfing beaches, but the Tasman Sea there is extremely rough. There's lots of signs to let you know that there's rip tides and currents. And there is a little hill up there, and we started to see a lot of the Aboriginal or Maori carvings and artwork as we went up there. We did climb up to the top of that little peak, and that's looking back on the Black Sands beach. This was quite early in the morning. Later in the day, there was a few more people around, and we did see the surf club out with their patrol. They have little boats that they bring out, so they're sitting on the beach to watch the surfers and help out if need be. From there, we went up to Fangeray. That was the one that starts with a W, as Leo pointed out, but it's called Fangeray. This is where Captain Cook was at one time, and he's taking out the timber and the coal from the area. We were staying with a local fellow who was a club member there, and he took us out on a boat to go fishing. But this is just the coastline along the way. And we did catch a fish. Now, this was interesting because he said, oh, that's too small, we'll throw it back. Unfortunately, it was the only one we caught that day. This is the climb up to, we went up to some of the peaks up there. This is a very common path in New Zealand. Up 10 steps, flat for about 2 steps. Up another 15 steps, flat for about 1 step. So this is a very common steps, but look at the view when we get to the top. So this is Mount Manai, and we were staying just at the bottom off a little bit to the right, hidden behind this, the hillside there, but absolutely beautiful and stunning. We did go swimming down in the bay one day with them, and had just a wonderful time staying there with Stu. After that, while we were there, this is on one of the walks, and I'm going to, hopefully you can see this expanded for you as well. We met a Maori fellow with some incredible tattoos, and we're not generally fond of tattoos on people, but this was an amazing tattoo, and he let us take a picture. His back was also covered, and it was absolutely beautiful tattoo that he told us about and how it related to him and his family. So this is in Fangeray, beautiful coastal town, lots of bridges, lots of boats, lots of sailing people, of course. I'm sure some of you have been down there with the sailing as well. It was Christmas, and of course, coming from Canada, we're not used to Christmas in the middle of the flower season. So there'll be a few pictures of Christmas trees in the flowers. So it was a beautiful, beautiful place to go. They did have some artwork there. This is the Hundertwasser Art Center that they're just building down there. And you'll see a few more pictures we're going to see. This is right in Fangeray. And this was just a little display that they were doing. This is going to be the preliminary preview of the art center that they were building there. But it was early days, so they haven't got going on it. But a little bit further up the road, a place called Kawakawa. This is the Hundertwasser lived there from the mid-1970s until he died in the 2000. And he created, this is a local washrooms, the public washrooms, incredible detail of the pottery and the colors and the tiles. Everything's at angles.
So this is a little bit tricky to pick up on, because this is actually like the gate that they would use to close it at night. So you can see the hinges there about mid-screen, and then it's latched. So obviously the washrooms are open, and then you're seeing all the other tile work. But that's why that picture is a tiny bit difficult to pick her out. And then on the left is a column that would hope. But the actual cubicles and the toilets and the stalls were just as amazing. It's just one of these places you can't believe you've stumbled upon.
And this is just some of the tile work. The whole town, it's quite a small town, but the whole town has all kinds of murals done on the walls like this of his artwork. There, I guess we don't have, there is a railway that goes through the middle of the town that's now a tourist town as well, which is the railway from when they used to collect the coal. This is just a little bit further up the road, maybe half an hour away, and we're looking for some hot pools, and local people mentioned that we could go to this one. They are quite rustic pools. As you can see, they're just basically holes in the ground. The pools aren't very big quite a large range of temperature, to quite cool to extremely hot. They're mud bottoms, and it was just quite neat to go into those, and very interesting walkways and people to talk to and things like that. And as we got out of the hot pools, there was somebody taking their horse for a walk, or maybe they were recovering. He had run away and they were taking home. I'm not quite sure which, but they were going off with their horse down the road. Then we headed further north. Oh, this is just coming out of that Nagoa. There's a geothermal power station in that area. Obviously, all of New Zealand has a lot of geothermal heat, and lots of volcanoes and hot pools and things like that all through the country, both North and South Island. And there is a power station in this area. This is the typical roads that we are driving on, and my husband Leo rides motorcycle, and it would be an incredible ride for those of you who ride motorcycles. The roads are just banked perfectly, lots of hills, lots of corners. And this is just exactly what it looks like. And actually that looks pretty tame to some of the roads we were on. So we are heading north, and it's up towards Cotta and Cape Rienga. We did start to get into some of the fog and different things up there. Yeah, you can see it's quite foggy that day. Some of the cattle, lots of ranching up there. Looks like rather poor agricultural area. It wasn't farmland as in apple trees or orchards or things. It was more the cattle ranches. And we did, as we say, Leo had mentioned, we stayed with a fellow at at Cotta, and he offered to take us up and beat the tourist buses and get right up to Cape Rienga. So this is where the Tasman and the Pacific Ocean meet. It's supposed to be a beautiful spot when you can see the two oceans meet in the current and the waves, but you can see we could barely see even the ocean. We were up it's quite a steep cliff. We could see the signs and the lighthouse in the fog, but that was about it. This is a very sacred spot. It is for the Maori people. It is a national park, and the Maori, it's a sacred spot for them because this is where the spirits leap off to the afterlife. From here, we went with our host, Stu, and we went on to 90 Mile Beach, which is actually a highway, considered a highway in New Zealand. If you're renting a car, it usually very specifically says you are not allowed to drive on the 90 Mile Beach or other beaches with your rental car. But we're fortunately in a four-wheel drive with a very experienced driver.
I'd just like to comment on this. Like for me, I've been around this kind of stuff, but enough to pay attention and be very respectful. But what I was not aware of is if you park your car there for even a short period of time, what happens is the water erodes the sand around your vehicle. So very quickly you start to sink into the sand, and now you're stuck. And so again, that's where this guy was just he was just that much more instead of us being on a big bus tour, we were right in the middle of it. It was fabulous.
Beautiful beach, sand dunes, there's the water. So we're kind of driving down, you can see the ocean off to your far right, and then just where the water is, and then the dunes off to your left. So just cruising down there, stopped for a while, well up on the sand, so we wouldn't sink down and lose our vehicle. But these are little clams called tui-tuis, and we collected a bucket in no time whatsoever. And then we went back to Stu's place. They cooked them up for supper. It was absolutely delicious. We also saw some people out there fishing. So they're putting out a long line and then they reel it back in. We didn't see them catch anything.
Yeah, this was something I've never ever seen. It's like a torpedo. You see, it's like this item is like a buoy, or the size of a salmon, for you that are fishermen, about 2 feet long, and it goes out into the ocean, and it'll take maybe, let's say, 400 hooks with you. It'll go like maybe 1,000 feet out into the ocean, and then, you know, when you've run out of line, you push the button and you start reeling it in slowly, and it brings back. So that's how they're fishing. This is now legal in this area of New Zealand. I'd never seen this before. It's quite interesting.
Unfortunately, we didn't actually see them bring it in with any fish, but that's okay. Now we've moved on to the Bay of Islands, and I know there's people on there who are very familiar with that area. So this is the, we went to the Watanga Treaty House, which is where they signed the treaty in 1840 to, with the British as well. This is actually the Waka House, Waka meaning canoe, and that was their canoe down in there. And there's a closer up of the canoe, very, very large canoe it is. And that's some of the carvings on the side of it.
I have to comment, this whole area was really, really, really pretty. We ended up with a little bit of fog, which is one of the reasons we showed you some fog earlier. There's at times that was our problem. We were close to the water and stuff like that, but it's a very interesting place. It's very historic because this is, as indicated, Anita indicated, there's the treaty was signed there. So there's reference to this place all the time.
There's just a picture a little bit further back so you can see the back of the canoe as well. The front, I guess I should say.
Wow.
And this, oh, John, this is the Maori. There is up there at the by the Watanga Treaty House. There is a Maori cultural show, and this is their formal welcoming. Welcoming ceremony. It's a very traditional thing, and we later down in Rotorua we went to a Maori cultural event too, and again they had the formal welcoming ceremony. Very, very beautiful. And inside, this is some of the songs that they were singing. We were able to see it. And if you look at the background behind the folks, the weavings are absolutely spectacular, and the carvings as well. Just beautiful. So this is one of the houses that we, I think.
This was the old governor's house, and it had kind of fallen into disrepair. There's a couple people that were authors and had written some books, and these people had some money, so they actually acquired this piece of land. They kind of got it back into reasonable shape, and then at some point in time donated the land as well as this piece of this home back to the state. So now they've refurbished the home, made it kind of more contemporary, back to more to the period of the time, and it's part of that whole treaty house area. So it's a museum, and again, those other things, the war canoe was there, and that other cultural center was just off to the side there.
This is Leo standing in the back. This is a kauri tree, or the stump of a kauri tree. And this is how big they are. And I know, Neil, I think you were talking about the kauri trees earlier. They're absolutely spectacular. They're very, very large trees, but you can see that, like, Leo was standing close right up to it. Like, this must be probably 12 feet across at least. We're up there at Christmas time. So this was actually for Christmas Day. We went wandering around and to 6 different waterfalls that we did that day. We were not staying with travel club members at this time. We took a lodge in the area. This is what we see quite often in the northern area, particularly in that there's lots of places for walking, but they have you clean your shoes as you coming out. It says kauri dieback is killing our kauri trees. So that's a fungus that's killing the trees. So these are cleaning stations where they want you to wash your shoes as you come in and out of the forest. This is just some of the plants, and I can't actually remember what it was. It's all over the place. As probably most of you know, New Zealand imports a lot of, or imported over the last 150 years, a lot of plants and animals that are not native to their country, and then they become weeds. So I thought they were very pretty, but the locals think they're weeds all over the place. So, and probably some of you know what the name are, but I've forgotten. Yeah, this is just one of the other waterfalls we went to see in Christmas. Beautiful area. And this is a pear tree that's close. Oops, sorry, I'll go back a minute. I went too fast on that one. A pear tree that was planted in 1819. So it's one of the oldest, it is the oldest specimen of its kind in New Zealand. And there's Leo in front of that pear tree. So very, very large tree. And there was pears on it, as you can see. So it's still producing.
If you look just directly above my head, you can see the pears there. I mean, it wasn't as productive as you might imagine, but yeah, it's still kicking out fruit. It's over 200 years old now.
And then this is just one of the other parks we went to in that area as well. I can't remember the name of this tree, but there's some spectacular trees and beautiful places for walking around. Then we actually had a bit of rain, but then it cleared up and we went over to Russell. But before I talk about that, I'll just mention that in Pahia is not that large a town. And again, I know that Neil, I think you're from that area, but we were there and it was pretty nice and quiet. We were chatting with some of the other people and they said, oh, the cruise ships are coming in around New Year's. So this is Christmas. And they said when the cruise ships come, like it doubles and triples the population in a matter of hours. So it's a very good for the tourism. And of course, lots and lots of buses meet the cruise ships and allows people to go to other places as well. But it becomes very, very busy. So we are fortunate that we were there the week ahead and we were able to take the little ferry that goes over to Russell. Russell is a small island just outside of Pahia and across basically the little strait there from the Watanga Treaty House. And this is where the British had their first permanent European settlement. It was the first capital of New Zealand because, of course, they signed the treaty right there in Watanga, and then they made this the capital city. And it had the first hotel and bar, which actually was probably that red-faced building straight ahead, I think might be it. But it was, as you know, sailors coming across the sea and then finally getting to ground and having a hotel and bar. It was a pretty wild place. It had quite the reputation, and it was not, the local people were not particularly fond of the people over in Russell. This is just a beautiful wall that I saw of succulents all over. And I thought, wow, that's a neat wall of, I could maybe do something like that on my south side, which is extremely hot. So I like that. This is one of the first churches, of course, in Russell, and some of the Maori people are built there. This is Irina, the daughter of one of the chiefs who died at Russell and was buried there. So some of the oldest gravestones, obviously, in New Zealand are at this church. And then that's us. We're back in Pahia, and where you can see the village and settlement over there. That's how far away Russell is. So it's not very far. This is actually the place that we were staying, the lodge we were staying at over Christmas, and they grew oranges, which again, we don't have a lot of oranges growing up here in our backyard in Vancouver Island, but they did down there and we enjoyed it. So that was the lodge that we visited for about 4 days over Christmas.
So this is the second part of the map here. So just south of Auckland, there's Waiuku right there. And I really, really found this part of New Zealand really interesting because the hills were really, really tight one to the other. So the roads were incredibly windy. I mean, hills every, 200 feet. So you're up and down a hill, up and down a hill. It was very challenging driving, but really beautiful. And then from there, we worked our way towards, we'll show you later on, it'll be Tirau. And then we're headed to Rotorua. And then from there, we go across on the bottom side there to a place called Te Kuriki. And that's where everyone goes to these Waitomo caves. And Anita and I have traveled enough. We don't like to really do the tourist type thing. So we actually found another little tour operator that took us to other caves rather than Waitomo caves. And that was a good call. It really worked out well because it was a smaller operation, and he took us to 2 or 3 little other caves that were not so well known, but got us into the forest a lot more. And then from there we headed south to New Plymouth, where you see there's a amazing volcano. I should know the name of it offhand. No, that Taranaki. Mount Taranaki, and I've been around this stuff before where you think, well, you better take a picture of it because you never know when it's going to cloud over. But we ended up being there for about 3 or 4 days, and every day was picture perfect. The volcano never fought. It was just there for us to take pictures of. From there, we went south to Herrera, and then on our way to Fanganui, and then from there to Palmerston North, and then we went to Wellington. And this is where I said, sorry, Kathleen said, we ended up going south, and then we'll come back and finish off the North Island.
So this is over there by Waiuku. Waiuku is a very agricultural area. It's a big river called the Wakado River that goes there. So from where we were staying with our hosts, I love staying with hosts because they can tell you all the back roads and the neat places to go to. So we went down to the Wakado River, and it was really neat because there's just layers and layers and layers of little clamshells from years ago when the sediment was forming there. But there's the Wakado River looking out towards the ocean, beautiful black sand beach. And that's again some of the iron sands. There's looking the other way. And there was a steel mill nearby.
Yeah, this is something I'd never ever heard. Like they actually dig up the sand, and through some process, they refine the sand and make steel out of the iron. Like something I'd never heard of before. So it was kind of interesting. We actually tried to get a tour of the mill, and they said our timing was off. They said in another month's time they would have some staff, like summer students and stuff like that, that could have did that. So we never did. But I was a little disappointed that we didn't get a chance to go in and check this place out.
And then from the beach heading back through a planted forest, lots of forests, but they were planted. But this is the hillside that we were referring to, that Leo was talking to, just very bumpy and all over the place. And the roads go with the bumps, I tell you. So that's just some of the scenery in that area.
Now, again, this is what Anita was saying, with us staying with local people, I've done some caving, I've done spelunking, and I've done some scuba diving inside caves. But I have to tell you, this is easily one of the most beautiful caves I've ever been in. When you get there, the guy's he's really connected to the land, and people just leave their running shoes there. So you take off your proper footwear and you just grab somebody else's old shoes, because you're going to be in water inside this cave. And the entrance is a little bit tricky if you're a tiny bit claustrophobic. I obviously am not, but you just have to squeeze through the entrance and then you're away. That's the worst of it, is just getting in through the cave entrance. And after that, it was so beautiful. I've been in lots of caves. This was a magnificent cave. And again, it was really not on the map. There were little signs that kept pointing, saying Nikau Caves. So you drive and drive and drive, and then you'd have to make a decision. Oh, there was another sign pointing to Nikau Caves. So we had no problems finding it. But this is the kind of terrain we saw after we left, because we took a roundabout way to get back to our hosts. But it was just beautiful. I love this part of New Zealand.
And that's just some more of the countryside that we're going through at the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was an interesting place. Again, we were heading for Rotorua, so we asked our host, what kind of which roads to take for something interesting. This is a little place called Terra. It's a very agricultural area. The town itself is probably less than 1,000 people. It's not a big town, but they've used this corrugated metal to make some of their buildings. This is the information center. And they had some other shops. So I think there's 2 or 3 or 4 of these. So just a really neat little place that we went by over there. That's the tour shop.
This is the tourism bureau. It's just so cool. I like it.
Anyway, then we went on to Rotorua, which probably many of you have heard about. It's lots of geothermal activity in this area. So we did go on a tour or into an area where you pay for entrance and go in and see all the different geysers. And this was, of course, they pour something down it to make it flare up at that particular time. Mud baths, very hot, very good pathways and stuff like that. The colors were amazing. It's just a very beautiful area. We don't have Yellowstone or anything up there, but probably similar, I'm sure, up there. This is the whole river where it's flowing from one stream down to another lake, and it's just flowing down there. I like the signs here. No walking, but here it's over 100 degrees Celsius on that. If you step over the fence and think you walk out to the pool, probably not a good idea. This is just some of the green ferns that are on the side, because ferns everywhere, and that's one of the symbols for New Zealand. Champagne pool, it had some beautiful colors. It talks about the colors there. Yeah. And this is the largest hot spring in New Zealand. So it is quite a large one. This one had different colors, obviously different minerals. And then we also went, staying at Rotorua. We stayed at the youth hostel in Rotorua, and we went one evening to a hangi. I think that's what they call it. And that was where, again, we had the Maori people performing. And also the hangi itself is they're cooking their meals. You can see on the ground there's a bunch of mats, and under that they've put wood, and they've got coals, and then they put all the food inside there to cook. And then later they bring it out and serve it in the hall where we were eating. But some great performances as well. And it was New Year's Eve. So we walked down to the lake, and there was some beautiful celebrations down there. Now we're heading down south of Rotorua, or actually, I guess we're heading west from Rotorua, heading over to where Leo was talking about the Waitoma Caves. So again, this is just some of the landscape along the way. Oh, yeah. Right. This is actually in, what is it called? New Plymouth. New Plymouth. We stopped there. We're on our way to Harara, which is a little bit further south, but we're not familiar very much with cricket. So as we were wandering around in this park, we found this fabulous amphitheater, and they were playing cricket down there. So we watched them for a while. I can't say that we understood the game, but later we did stay with some hosts that explained it to us. But what was neat about this was the way the amphitheater was done. It's just beautiful, beautiful sections all the way around, where you can bring your own chair or sit on the grass and look down at the game. And they have a number of other things going there as well at different times of the year. Then as we headed south, we're going through in the back of this picture, this little town is called Elphin, sorry. And at the back, you can see the picture of Mount Taranaki. This was we're in a very large area that's very much into dairy and farming, and this little town doesn't really exist much anymore, but had some neat museum things. And because it was Christmas, some of the people decorated up the local trees, which I thought was rather cute. And there's Mount Taranaki. And this is one we probably have 1,000 pictures of, but I won't show them to you all, but we did see some beautiful pictures of Mount Taranaki. Just let you read that little sign from one of the local parks. And we did a hike up to Mount Taranaki. We're going to go up almost to the edge of the tree line. So you can see our little bit of the path there. And we walk through pretty much to the edge of the tree line. There's lots of trails up there. They're well marked. Some of them go around the mountain and some go up the mountain. And while we were hiking up there, we noticed the helicopter coming by. And because we belong to the Air Search and Rescue here in Vancouver Island, we kind of paid attention to the helicopter. And one of the other people hiking told us it was a search and rescue. And later we found out that a young teenager, 13-year-old, had fallen and broken his arms, or I think that was the story. So he needed to be rescued in there. There was a memorial on the way up for Sir Edmund Hillary. So we had stopped there for a little rest. And the next couple pictures will just kind of show you the trails that we are on. So it's a well-marked trail, but lots of steps again.
It's actually very, very rugged. And what happens around here is if you stray off the trail, you can easily get lost. Like you can't find your way back. So it's very, very thick vegetation. Like you can't see 15 feet into it because it's all about, might not be more than 20 feet tall, but like, go back to
Oh,
that.
sorry. Hit the wrong button.
There you go. It shows you the idea of how much vegetation there is there. So anyways, we kept to the trail. We had absolutely no difficulty, but it was worth doing the hike. It was wonderful.
And there you can just see see in the far side, the trails and the steps. As I mentioned right at the beginning, lots of steps on the trails around here. And we're getting up past almost to the end of the tree line in the bush into the open. It was very windy. We actually met a lot of people heading down. And so we didn't go up past the tree line because it got to be too windy up there. There's another.
How far did you go?
Well, we went, the destination was Arthur's, Hillary's seat. So there's a commemorative plaque out to them. And then I chose to just go over that little hill where Anita had a picture of it. So we probably made it maybe up a third of Mount Taranaki.
Okay.
We were gone
Wow.
pretty much the whole day.
Okay.
Then we headed further south along here, and this is to Manganui, where we had heard that there was a neat paddle steamer, which you can see right there, a coal-fired paddle steamer, the Waimarie. And this one actually had sunk in the river, and then they were able to bring it up and clean it up and make it look beautiful. So we did a little cruise on it.
You have to admire, it's not my skill set, but that was the original engine that they had rebuilt. So somebody had meticulously taken it apart. It was in fresh water, so that was a huge advantage, but they still, they floated it to the surface and they rebuilt that engine. So good for them.
So that's just the inside of the lounge down below.
And the gentleman Hattrick, he was one of the owners. I think there were 3 owners of this steam paddle wheeler.
And then again, this is just in the Wanganui, so as we walked around a little bit, seeing some of the Christmas decorations up again. Then we headed south again. We're to Palmerston North. We actually stayed in a little town called Fielding, but we're heading to Palmerston North. And this was the New Zealand Rugby Museum. And it was a very fascinating place. This is the original wooden whistle. And I think they still use it at the start. It's been used ever since the start of the opening games of the World Rugby.
We have a son-in-law who's a rugby player. So he told us to pay attention, see if we could find this. And I actually picked up a book for him from the museum. It's just one of those places that I'm really glad we went to it.
So there's just some excellent place to go. And when we were staying in Fielding, the folks said that their son worked for sheep farming, and would we like to go see the sheep shearing, because it was sheep shearing time. And we said, absolutely, yes. So there's the big bales of the sheep. This is towards the end. They had spent a couple days, and this is sort of the last day. They were just doing a few more things. There's one of the shearers. And because it was the end of the day, whoa, wait a minute, I gotta show you that picture. There's Leo. He got the shears in his hand, and he was able to do that as well. And there's the sheep when they were sheared.
This was actually so much fun. You have to separate the sheep. And these are gates, you see. So you decide, okay, are all the males going one way, or all the field, or the one, you decide which one's your. So this is how they separate the sheep, and it was amazing. Obviously, I was a novice, but to watch, because these sheep come through quickly, so you have to be really on top of this to make this work.
And these folks that we were staying with had a beautiful farm, and they had, as well as the sheep, they had the cattle, and absolutely spectacular animals. From there, we went on right down to Wellington, and there happened to be a museum exhibit of the terracotta warriors. So just a few pictures of the terracotta warriors that we were able to see while we were there. And we just took the train down to Wellington rather than worry about trying to drive and park, et cetera, et cetera. Then we walked along the waterfront. We saw the Parliament buildings, the Beehive Parliament building, This is actually the library, the parliamentary library, and the railway station, which is right across the street. Oh, that's just a beautiful house that was there, but right across the street from the railway station is where we pick up the boat to go to the ferry to go to South Island. So you do have to pay attention. There's a couple different companies. You pretty much should book ahead. It was around $350 at that time. It's about a 3-hour ride. And again, you have to check whether they allow your rental car on the ferry. Some of them want you to leave the car on this side, walk on and pick up a new car on the far side. So there's what we went across and just a few of the pictures as we came back. Okay,
so at that point, we actually went to the South Island, but we're gonna carry on with our trip of the rest of the North Island. So you guys get that portion of our trip. And so we went from Wellington, we went north. You can see there's, I think it's Masterton right there. And then from there, we went up to Napier and Hastings, which is just a wonderful area. We really like that. Then back to Taupo. And then down from Taupo, we went down to this national park. That's the name of the town. The town is called National Park. It's a little confusing. And then back to Rotorua, up to Mount Manganui, and then over to Cambridge, and then Hamilton.
So this is just some of the rugged country as we come north from Wellington and heading over. At the very top of the mountains is a Rimataka crossing, which is where the soldiers walked. They walked to get to Wellington to be able to sign up to go overseas. This is up at Napier and Hastings. Napier is a city they had a big earthquake in 1931. And so then they rebuilt and everything's about the 1930s Art Deco type of buildings. So just some really neat things. We did go to a neat museum. Again, this is the fellow of the artist, but you can see the tattoos on his face and arms and neck there. So this is the fellow, just a few of his plastic.
This is all made with recycled plastic. Every part of this is recycled bottles, and it's absolutely amazing. Never saw anything like this before.
This is just some of the buildings around there. And that's the
swimming pool.
Yeah.
Or the aquarium.
Aquarium, yeah. There's the aquarium too again. Some neat statues all around. We really enjoyed it around here. Very much an agricultural area. This is looking down towards the ocean over there. You can see, but again, the hillside is very rough up down there. This one shows you though that there is a lot of agricultural going on, lots of vineyards and different things. This was actually in Hastings. We went down there and there's a big area of public art, lots of the Maori art. There's about 18 statues there, which is beautiful.
So we only have about 15 minutes left. So we'll try to cycle through these photos as quickly as we can.
So we have time. We rented bicycles down there and did a beautiful trip out along the water. It was hot, but it was okay. This is back in Napier again, because they have a special festival, the Art Deco Festival in February, and people come from around the world. So there's all kinds of old cars. And
so again, we played our cards right. We arrived a couple days prior to the festival, then went down to Napier and then came back to catch it when it was on. By that time, we'd already seen the town without having to deal with all the tourists.
And this again is in Napier, just a very high point that you can get down and look down on the harbor. It was just the port, I should say, just a very, very interesting. We could spend hours there. Very, very busy. Cruise ships, logs to load, things to unload. Amazing. Now we've moved over to Taupo, so we've gone west and a little bit north, and they have it's actually the Wakado River again, which is they've got a power station on it, and then the water, there's the power station, and the water comes down through this rig. It looks very, very empty, but within minutes, that's what it looks like. So that once they open those gates, the water just pours right through, and it's quite neat to see. Lots of geothermal areas around there. So we're just wandering around and you can see it bubbling up around us. Then we went down to an area called, like Leo mentioned before, National Park. There's a very famous walk between the mountains up there, the Tongariro Alpine crossing, but we chose not to do it. We started just behind here. It's just too busy. It's
wall-to-wall people, wall-to-wall tourists go to do this thing, and you know, we're not paying $80 to stand in line to go. I just assume go down a different road. Thank you.
So we took a quiet road on the side instead, but it goes up along the mountains there. There's some neat countryside, and that's where if we'd walked, we would have been up along those mountains and in between, but we were fine. Then back at Taupo, we were able to find some natural hot pools, and that's what it looked like. So the Wakado River goes beside, which is nice and cool, but if you back up into the rocks, you get hotter and hotter as it comes down the river.
And by this time, we'd been there for about two and a half months, so we're able to, we can get to the information a lot better, and we're not finding necessarily all the tourist traps, but are basically finding some of the stuff on our own. So this was a hidden little beach, and very busy, but you know,
Fun.
Very fun.
And we also rented kayaks and went out there. This is on the kayak looking back at this little beach that we had been on where the hot water comes down. And then we went back to Rotorua, and by then we weren't paying to go into the hot tubs at all. So we just asked the local people, and there's all kinds of natural places that you can go where the hot tubs are, or the hot water is. This was a fun one because it was a river with a little falls. And again, it's just a hot river flowing down through the forest. You just have to ask the locals where to find it. Nearby, we didn't go to Hobbit Town, but it is in that area. And this is some of the displays that they had up advertising. And if you want to go to the tours, there's the different places depending on where you're starting from.
Yeah, so this is not it. This is just the advertising. Like this is at the bus station where they would take you to this thing, but no.
Yeah. But we did stay, then we went up to Mount Manganui in Terra. In the Bay of Plenty, we stayed with some friends there that had some beautiful house and accommodation for us. I love the pool. And we learned at that point to take a picture of the map before you go hiking, because often there's no signs as you're hiking. So take the picture on your phone of the map before you head out, because that might be the only map you see, and it's way down at the bottom if you forget where you're going. But from the top, this is our view of Mount Manganui, another beautiful space. If you remember, and just off the coast there, what is White Island, and in December there was the volcanic action on White Island that killed 22 people, so that we would have been able to see it from up there.
There's a bird.
This one has a little bird. I don't know if you can all see it there.
There's a fan. It's called a fantail. It's quite a gregarious, outgoing little bird. It likes to show itself and you know, put on a little display. So it's quite cute. Unfortunately, that's probably the only picture we have of it.
Then we went along. There was a lot of kiwis, and we thought of growing kiwis up here, so we took a few pictures of the kiwis along there. We decided they probably need too much pruning for the amount of work we want to do. And this is a flag we saw in New Zealand, and we often buy flags of different countries that we go to, or mugs with a picture of the flag, and we couldn't really find it in New Zealand. And then we saw this one, which we thought was just beautiful. The story is, a few years ago, the Prime Minister was having a hard time, so he thought he'd have a competition to create a new flag. It failed him. I don't think he didn't carry on, and they didn't get a new flag. But this is one that we saw that we thought, wow, if we were voting on it, we would have taken that one with the silver fern and the stars. From there, we headed up north. We're just heading towards the Coromandel Peninsula, but we didn't go there. We stopped at Waihi, and they have an open pit gold mine, which had collapsed quite a few years ago now, so they're no longer taking gold out of it. But
this is the reason the mine is closed, because the government deemed it was unstable. So it took them years to figure out how they're going to actually reopen the mine, and they had to deal with that problem.
Yeah, so there was a lot of interesting things to see there. This is the old railway where the gold used to go out. And again, we rented bicycles to go along the rail trail. And you even get to go through the tunnel, quite a big tunnel there. Very long, very dark inside. So it was interesting. And that's just some of the roadside trails that we walked on as well. Then we headed down to Cambridge, and the lady we were staying with there took us to the velodrome. So we watched the velodrome. So you'll see there's a motorcycle and a cyclist on there. So the motorcyclist sets the speed, and the fellow on the bike, I guess, keeps the speed up. Whoops. This is actually in Hamilton nearby. We went to a display of the 50 greatest photographs of the National Geographic, and I'm sure all of you will recognize that picture. And inside that museum, there's also a beautiful waka or canoe. Awesome picture. Sorry, I just have to find my picture. I've just lost my.
Yes, I think
No.
it did that
Oh,
to
did
me
it?
as well.
Oh,
It
okay.
did that to me as well. You're 5 pictures away from the end, so
Okay.
that's good to know.
All right. Well, I guess that's the end of pictures. From there, we went on to the gardens and in Hamilton as well, which are absolutely beautiful. And then we flew home because this is the end of our trip. So we'll stop now. And then I know we went fairly long, but perhaps some of you have some quick questions and we can chat. And we will be presenting the South Island in a couple months.
Wow. Well, that was an amazing trip. Really wonderful information. Maybe we can stop the screen share and then we'll ask questions.
Okay.
There was one chat question. It was Sue suggesting that blue plant, the blue flowers, was an agapanthus or lily of the Nile.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That sounds right. I had a question. You mentioned about finding the personal guides. You found one for the Cape Rienga and then back again with the caves. How did you find them? What did you Google or search, or did you do it ahead of time, or did you wait till you were there?
It was actually the people we were staying with, Kathleen. The fellow, when we went to Cotta, we were staying in a place and just sitting around chatting and saying, he sort of says, well, what are you doing tomorrow? And we're thinking, well, we said, we're thinking of, going on the bus and going up to Cape Rienga. He says, oh, I could drive you. I've got a 4-wheel drive. I've done it many a times. So, it just went that way. And the same with the guides in the caves. That was just talking to our local host that we were staying with. And they suggested to go down to the caves. And then when you get down there, that particular cave, he only goes on guided tours. You can't go through. It's on his private property. And he only takes like 6 or 8 people at a time through that. So it's just talking to the local people, really, which is, the magic of the club.
It really is. There's another question, and it may be that he'll need to unmute himself if there's some more questions.
Yeah, we have a question.
I wish you had more photos of the kaori trees. Many people looking for amber died in those trees when they lost their equipment. Do you know anything about that?
Most of the kauri trees were on the west side, and we really didn't go through those parks out there. There's been a lot of die out of the trees in other areas. So no, we didn't really see the huge forests of the kauri trees, but I know that Neil might be able to talk about that a little bit more.
When we landed in Auckland, we went to a park area. It started with an A, really close to downtown. And in there was, I'm going to say, a cathedral of those trees. So we went up a path and we were in the middle of, you felt like you were in a cathedral. It was very close and it was free to go to.
All trees are like an evergreen, like a,
No,
no.
but they're very old.
Very tall, really.
Yes.
Tall.
I saw a lot of kauri trees too in the Coromandel Peninsula. We had stayed in Thames for a week with the hosts there, and they took us up into the forest there. But the ships that came from Britain used those
The end of the
for
park.
the masts for the big ships, so they cut a lot of those.
Yes.
Which
Well, is that like the only main source of amber? Is those trees in the world?
Hardwood or barky or what?
they're real hard wood, similar to our sequoias, I suppose, and redwoods, more like the redwoods, I guess, because they're good for building and ship masts.
Listen to that bug.
This is George Meyer. This is George Meyer in California. We saw some of those trees, and they were bigger than our sequoias. And it's amazing what you could make out of one piece of wood. But they were so tall that many immigrants would come and try and get up to the top to collect all the amber. But they would occasionally lose equipment, and they couldn't get down. And so they found skeletons in the high up parts of those trees.
Interesting.
A question for Anita. In Cambridge, I'm assuming you stayed with Jeanette Boswell?
Yes, we did.
Oh, she was fabulous.
Yes, yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, she was fabulous, is absolutely right. Yeah.